Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those of you for whom it's just 12 noon East. Thank you for joining us this Monday. I'm Mike Swigert, Associate Director for Inclusive Economies with the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar to share learning from our recent community of practice on financial capability and wealth building in partnership with MyPath. Before we get started, I'm going to pass it to Sam Diaz from Prudential for some brief remarks before diving in. Sam, I turn it to you.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, or wherever you're joining us from. Thank you, Mike. I'm really excited to kick us off today, discussing financial capability, financial inclusion, and security for young people and young adults. If you haven't met me or I haven't met you, my name is Sam Diaz. I was born and raised in the South Bronx, and I'm currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I work for Prudential. And Prudential is a financial services institution dedicated to making lives better by solving the financial challenges of our changing world. And so for the past 5 years, I have led our philanthropic strategy, supporting Opportunity Youth. Recently, within the last couple of months, I've transitioned to a new role leading our measurement and reporting strategy. But supporting young people is incredibly important to me, both personally and professionally. I mentioned I grew up in the South Bronx, and when I was a teenager, I was living in what was at the time the poorest congressional district in the country. And, I saw firsthand how systems were failing young people, failing my friends, my family. And actually my first job way before Prudential was selling water bottles on the side of the street just so I could, buy something to eat. And so I've come away since then. And, one of the wonderful things about my current job has been supporting this body of work. So in 2019, Prudential made a commitment to support Opportunity Youth. We committed $180 million. It was a mixture of both impact investments as well as grants. And we said we would invest 180 million by 2025. It was the largest commitment ever made and still made by any company that specifically targets Opportunity Youth. And so I'm proud to say that we've actually met and exceeded that commitment a year early this year. But so in addition to our Opportunity Youth work, we also, probably like at least 8 years ago before I joined, Prudential started investing in a thing called financial capability. And 10 years ago or so, there wasn't really a financial capability field. But what practitioners were saying, people on the ground were saying, was that we needed to move beyond just the idea of financial literacy. And we need to start thinking about how to help adults set their own goals, actually have greater agency over their own future, and that they should have access to one-on-one financial support, the same way that wealthy people, wealthy individuals have financial advisors who help them with their finances. And so if you can believe it, this concept, this idea at the time was kind of seen as audacious and a little bit crazy. And that's because it challenged some of the conventional wisdom and the bias around the fact that adults who were low to moderate income, people thought they wouldn't necessarily benefit, or they weren't ready for financial capability, that they were irresponsible, or that they shouldn't self-direct when it comes to their finances and their future, that they can't be trusted. And a lot of this is really rooted in racism. Luckily, over the past 10 or so years, we've proved them wrong. And we found that financial capability and financial coaching and other financial interventions have been shown to be effective. And we've been able to demonstrate that people do have the potential to become long-term investors in their future, regardless of their income level. And we also saw that people were hungry and they want access to these kinds of tools, the same tools that wealthier people have access to. And so as I think today, the story is repeating itself. And so we saw the evolution and support we've seen in adults. The same thing is happening for young people today, because conventional wisdom says that, oh, young people are too short-term. they're not ready to think about their finances yet. Oh, they just need a job. And while yes, I agree that a job is foundational to financial security, we know that the struggle does not end when you get a job. Wages are often stagnant, and a decent job is no longer guaranteed that you can be financially stable, let alone prosper. We also know there are a lot of challenges that are specific to young people. For example, young people can be victims of things like wage theft because they're not equipped to understand their paycheck and their finances. They might not be able to really evaluate and take full advantage of the workplace benefits that are offered to them. And even the benefits that they do have access to, they might not be youth-friendly or relevant to their particular needs and their aspirations. We also know that young people might be, just one emergency, one rainy day can really knock them out of their trajectory or path towards mobility because they don't necessarily have a financial cushion to help them through an emergency. And finally, we know that in many of our neighborhoods, good financial institutions might not exist. Or even if they do exist, they could be predatory. Or even if they're not predatory, they might have fees and fines that really would chip out in terms of a young person's ability to really build savings over time. And we know if young people don't feel welcome inside a bank or inside a financial institution, they're not going to want to engage. And so there's a lot of trauma and a lot of pain when it comes to young people and their relationship with money and with financial institutions. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm really excited about the work of this group and our partnership with Aspen, because I think, in 5 years or so, I hope that financial capability services for young people will be like a given and will be something that is naturally embedded into how we work with young people and how we help them achieve their dreams. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Mike.
Thank you so much, Sam. So here's how we'll spend the next hour. Building on Sam's remarks, I'll frame the conversation with a little bit of background about the Opportunity Youth Forum, and then pass it to Leslie for MyPath. She'll talk us through the recent community of practice, and then really excited to pass it to two participants from that group to share their experience before we close out with recommendations and discussion. This is set up as a webinar, but we hope it will be interactive. You can use the Q&A function, but the chat is also open. So if you toggle the to field in the chat to everyone, we encourage everyone here to introduce yourselves and your organizations and share resources and questions with our panelists throughout the conversation. So the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions promotes collaborative community-based efforts that build the power and influence of those with the least access to opportunity. Centering racial equity, we support communities to come together to expand mobility, eliminate systemic barriers, and determine their own solutions to their most pressing challenges. A huge part of this is the Opportunity Youth Forum. The OYF network that you see here is comprised of over 40 local collaborations in urban, rural, and Native, Indigenous, and tribal communities across the US that seek to build and scale reconnection pathways that achieve better outcomes in education, employment, and overall well-being for Opportunity Youth. Nearly 1 million Opportunity Youth live in OYF communities, and as part of a national movement, we seek to reduce youth disconnection by 50% across this network over the next decade, meaning 500,000 more young people connected to work and education. This ambitious goal requires multiple strategies, from building data capacity, scaling pathways, aligning coalitions to develop and inform the work at every stage with young people at the center. And we know from the first decade of our learning and impact that belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose are core to improving critical outcomes for young people. In 2021, with support from Prudential, the Aspen Forum launched a 5-year initiative to integrate the financial security and opportunity youth fields, and we're grateful for Prudential support as well as that of the Annie E. Casey Foundation in this initiative. The goal is to generate learning and expand opportunities for young people to experience financial well-being and ultimately build wealth. We value well-being holistically and know that economic thriving is necessary, but not sufficient for the future of lifetime prosperity that all young people deserve. Our framework is that young people need 4 things to experience financial well-being. Of course, a lack of financial stability is for too many an urgent and fundamental barrier, whether that's food insufficiency, lack of affordable housing or healthcare. Career and education pathways infused with support and guidance are in many ways the bread and butter of the OYF network and the work that many of you on this call do. So what about this last piece, financial capability, that Sam was talking about? As a practitioner once quipped to me, you can't financial literacy your way out of poverty, but skill building is a piece of the puzzle, and access to financial tools and services is something that's been too neglected. We define financial capability as a combination of individual attributes and systemic conditions, or as our partners at MyPath put it, FinCap equals ability, motivation, and opportunity to act, knowledge, confidence, and tools. This definition includes both things we can support programmatically through systems and pathways and systemic conditions. Frankly, financial capability is a weakness for the youth and young adult serving field. We've made some progress on what Sam mentioned, but even though financial literacy is one of WIOA's 14 program elements, it's wildly inconsistent on the ground. A 2022 survey of the OYF network made that clear. There's insufficient funding, and many communities report that safe, affordable, and useful financial products for opportunity youth are not available. So for this reason, we partnered with MyPath, experts on youth financial capability, to facilitate this learning community with partners from across the OYF network on how to integrate financial capability strategies into existing opportunity youth programs. So along with Sam, I'm delighted to be joined by some amazing leaders. Leslie Prado from MyPath, who's led the design and facilitation of this community of practice. Monique Robinson of Cafe Reconcile, an acclaimed workforce training program in New Orleans, is here even after a hurricane last week. And Julianne Dunn of Rural LISC supports opportunity youth partners in the Mississippi Delta, among other hats. So with that, Leslie, I turn it to you.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Mike. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Like Mike mentioned, my name is Leslie Prado. I'm the Senior Director of Programs on MyPath. Before we dive into the specifics of the community practice, I'd love to take a moment to share some background about who MyPath is. MyPath is a national nonprofit that champions financial capability and wealth building innovation for youth and young adults, and we've been doing this for more than 15 years. We pioneered this approach of engaging young people right as they're earning or receiving their first income to ensure that our models are not only timely, but also relevant. We are headquartered in San Francisco with roots in the city's Mission District. We were born out of a CDCU, so financial services is designed in our DNA. And the values that you see on this slide really animate our work to achieve a vision, which is that all youth have the knowledge, confidence, and tools that they need to get on the path to building wealth. In addition to the invigorating work we have been doing with financial capability and wealth building COP, which has been largely focused on practice, MyPath also values the work that is about policy and systems change, because the structural issues that have prevented equitable wealth building in this country require it. We always do this work in partnership with young people. So our mission is bold, so it is important that we walk through how we actually approach this. We do this in 3 ways. In partnership with youth, we design, test, and scale innovative financial capability interventions that engage young people as they earn their first income and begin their financial lives. We then share our results, lessons, and best practices with the field to support the adoption of our approaches. And lastly, alongside our young leaders, we engage policymakers and stakeholders to advance policy and systems level changes that will improve economic rights, opportunities, and financial pathway for youth from under-resourced communities. So what are the challenges young people are facing, particularly from BIPOC and low-income communities? And what is the context in which we are trying to achieve our vision? Within the US, financial capability among young adults is shockingly low. A 2021 FINRA Foundation survey really underscores this. From that survey, we found that 70% of young adults are just getting by financially. 72% are concerned the money they have or will save won't last. 56% report having a credit score that is average, below average, or poor. 44% of young adults do not feel comfortable going to a bank to ask questions. 34% do not have a savings account, and 57% do not have an emergency savings. These numbers are even more extreme for young people from BIPOC communities. So further complicating this picture are significant economic challenges we are all experiencing, including the recent pandemic and economic setbacks, the high cost of housing, inflation, rising student loan debt, the rise in political extremism, and the growing wealth and racial wealth gap. All this means that providing financial capability to opportunities to young adults is crucial. It is crucial for empowering them to navigate the complex economic landscape and build a stable and prosperous future. Young people between the ages of 15 and 24 are at the cusp of many financial firsts, like applying for their first credit card or applying for their first loan. And they often have to navigate these situations without the support of a trusted adult. This is particularly true for youth of color, opportunity youth, foster youth, justice-involved youth, young parents, and other groups that face greater levels of financial exclusion. This is why we were excited to join the Aspen OYF and all of you to bring our expertise and insights into the COP journey. Financial capability is not just about managing money. It's about fostering economic resilience and enabling young people to take control of their financial futures in the face of growing economic uncertainty. So at MyPath, we have 3 core models, which are technical assistance, financial mentoring, and youth leadership and advocacy. We are perhaps best known for providing technical assistance for organizations who want to integrate our saving and credit building models into their youth program. More recently, we pioneered providing financial mentoring alongside guaranteed income programs for young adults. We also offer a multi-year youth leadership and advocacy program for high school students and college students who want to become advocates and leaders in the economic justice movement. These models have generated strong outcomes for young people, and we are proud of what these models have been able, and we are proud of what they have been able to do using them and the tools that MyPath has designed and our partners have delivered. Since our national expansion in 2015, we have helped over 40,000 young people on the pathway to wealth building and economic empowerment. Here are just some exciting outcomes from this work. On average, of the youth engaged in our programs, 70% report an increase in financial knowledge and confidence. 83% report being able to confidently manage their money and credit. And youth are saving 30% of their paycheck. 100% of our youth report setting aside emergency savings as a result of financial mentoring, and 85% report an improvement in their overall FICO score. These are just some of the outcomes we've achieved, and we are thrilled that as members of the COP begin implementing their own thoughtful financial capability strategies that they develop through the COP, that their young people will experience these positive changes in their own lives too. Now, onto the Aspen community practice. Given MyPath's experience and leadership in the youth financial capability space, Aspen tapped us to help stand up and support a community of practice for applicant agencies of its OYF network. This COP would be practitioner focused with an emphasis on helping participant agencies with 3 main things. 1, increase their understanding of how to deliver quality financial capability services to young people. 2, complete a local landscape analysis to inform successful and sustainable financial capability integration. And 3, develop an implementation plan to launch and improve FinCap services, engage FinCap partners, and or secure additional FinCap resources. For MyPath and Aspen, our goals were to do these 3 things. 1, test MyPath's FinCap toolkit and technical assistance with Aspen's OYF agencies. 2, generate learnings about promising FinCap practices for the OYF network. And 3, inform strategies to change systems so that more young people of color experience financial well-being. So in October 2023, almost a year ago, we launched a learning cohort for 8 diverse organizations working with young people across the OYF network. From the Bay Area, our home turf, we had Oakland-based Urban Strategies Council and San Francisco-based Bay Area Community Resources. From the Twin Cities, we had Youth Prize. From Buffalo, the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo and their partners. The greatest COP contingency, though, was from the southern part of the U.S. We had Trombone Shorty Foundation and Cafe Reconcile from New Orleans, Rural LISC from the Mississippi Delta, and Monroe Harding from Nashville. Most of these organizations have workforce training programs that they operate directly or are seeking to embed FinCap within. Some run youth-oriented programming or serve as intermediaries for OY programs. While some serve small groups of youth, others are large, serving more than 1,000 youth per year. The group was varied, and this was a great strength within the COP. Excuse me. In terms of the actual running of the COP, here's how it worked and what we did. MyPath organized and led mostly virtual workshops for the COP participants, in which we took a deeper dive into different FinCap topics of interest. We also introduced and previewed tools and templates to support with FinCap plan development, and we fostered community building and cross-sharing of FinCap best practices. We were fortunate to have the opportunity to gather in person with all COP agencies and Mike at the May OYF convening in Boston. This allowed for extra time for additional topics of interest. We also got to meet and hear from youth of the COP agencies. But we were especially amazed by the investment and energy demonstrated by the group in staying over time to engage around their selected topics, which are guaranteed income and financial mentoring, and MyPath related lessons. In addition to the monthly workshops, MyPath also hosted monthly one-on-one TA sessions with those interested participating agencies to take an even deeper dive in their program logistics, youth financial needs and concerns, and local and regional community resources, all with an aim to support and develop and refinement of their individual FinCap plans. This step allowed an additional level of community building and engagement, which we appreciated. And lastly, in June and July, participating agencies presented their FinCap plans to the cohort and provided feedback to each other. In terms of content, MyPath primarily covered 5 topics that you see here. We covered FinCap curriculum and facilitation. This included reviewing and discussing curriculum design considerations for youth populations and exploring several publicly available financial education resources. We also discussed effective facilitation and engagement strategies for youth, including peer-led facilitation and training and support needs associated with that. We talked about banking for youth. With this particular topic, we explored common banking barriers for youth, payment methods that promote and integrate well with banking partnership considerations with tips and ideas. We also discussed important features of banking products and banking education. We discussed FinCap impact measurement for youth. This included discussing some of the different ways programs measure their FinCap impact, including metrics, time horizons, and methods. And we also took a look into MyPath's own data metrics and our measurement tool, which included MyPath, My Money, our newest fintech platform that helps with tracking outcomes and impact. Like I mentioned, we talked about guaranteed income for youth. In this particular topic, we reviewed the broad category of cash transfers, including definitions, history, and current trends. We discussed examples of cash transfer pilots specifically targeted to youth, and MyPath's experience with GI projects with transition age foster youth in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, and Black young adults ages 18 to 24 in San Francisco and Oakland. And lastly, we talked about financial mentoring for youth. We shared out about MyPath's financial mentoring model, including mentor recruitment, ideal characteristics and background, training and support, mentor recruitment and engagement, mentoring structures, and tools and best practices. And we also discussed MyPath's experience embedding financial mentoring within both GI projects and youth empowerment programs. The cohort also touched upon systems and policy concerns related to youth and financial capability that were of interest to this group. 5 of the participating agencies, the ones you see here, developed a financial capability plan for their organization and youth as part of the COP. Agencies presented their plans in June and July. For the 3 agencies shown on the top row, I will be sharing about their plans, and the 2 agencies below, Rural LISC and Cafe Reconcile, we will follow up with details about their own plans, which I'm excited to share, which I'm excited that they share with you all. So before we dive into the 3 work plans I mentioned, we've identified some key barriers tied to our lessons learned. One central theme standing out, which is funding. Closely related to that is a challenge of staff capacity. While there's a strong interest in advancing financial capability, these funding and staffing hurdles are significant. We'll explore some recommendations to address these challenges after we take the deep dive into the work plans. Great, so we'll start with Trombone Shorty Foundation. This organization is based in New Orleans and runs a very unique, one-of-a-kind music apprenticeship program, among other services. It's a newish kind of program. They've only been doing this for about 3 years, and they serve approximately 8 youth per year, ages 18 to 24. Ashley, who you see on the screen, has been our main point of contact for the COP. And prior to the COP, her program was already integrating many promising FinCap practices and partnerships. Building on this good work for their FinCap plan, they decided to focus their next 1 to 2 years on 5 areas of improvement, which include 1, increased frequency of FinCap workshops, making this monthly instead of twice a semester. They will also add content about P2P platforms, namely how they differ from banks and credit union. This has been a big need for them as well as other agencies. Also, boost supports for gig workers, which is the category of employment many of their participants fall into. These supports include helping participants learn how to create and manage invoices, receive gig worker specific tax help, which they found a great partner to do this, and to plan to save up for taxes so there are fewer financial setbacks and shocks during tax time. They also want to add financial coaching for their participants. And lastly, they want to leverage the services of approximately 3 community partners not previously used. So moving on to Monroe Harding. This organization is based in Nashville and provides a variety of housing, financial, and health and wellness supports to foster youth. It is a long-standing organization. They have been around for more than 130 years, and they serve about 300 youth per year in its financial program. The youth in this program are ages 16 to 26, and Shani and Melissa, the 2 individuals who you see on the screen, have been our key contacts for the COP, and they have developed a very robust FinCap plan for their org. Specifically, they want to focus on 3 areas over the next 2 to 3 years. The first one being expanding their current financial literacy plan, which is Opportunity Passport, a Jim Casey initiative, to serve opportunity youth 16 to 26 who are not involved in foster care. So expanding to reach non-foster youth with these services, since there is a need and demand there. Monroe Harding's goal is to reach 26 OY youth in the next 2 years and to expand to additional counties as funding permits. For these youth, they also want to provide IDAs with the matching funds to help support asset acquisition, like purchasing a car, paying for higher education, buying a computer, or more. Their current participants can receive up to a $3,000 match for their IDA deposit saved. Monroe Harding also may explore expanding their banking partnerships if they enter new counties and require as such. Additionally, they're launching a social enterprise with their youth called the Monroe Gardens Project, which will provide paid employment and work experience opportunities to enhance FinCap outcomes for their youth. Next, we have Youth Prize. Youth Prize is a multifaceted nonprofit based in the Twin Cities that aims to increase equity with and for Minnesota's disadvantaged youth. The organization started in 2010 and launched a direct cash transfer pilot for unhoused youth about a year ago. This pilot aims to serve 135 youth ages 18 to 24 and to provide them with $1,000 per month for 24 months, plus a one-time payment of approximately $4,000. They also provide participants with other optional wraparound supports. Christy Snyder, who you see on the screen, has been our key contact for this COP. For their FinCap plan, Youth Prize is focusing on 2 key goals. 1, bringing the agency's existing financial supports and services in a way that better serves their DCT participants with FinCap needs. And 2, pursuing policy and systems change that advances the FinCap outcomes for current and future youth participants. For the first part, Youth Prize aims to do 4 things. Promote positive banking relationships for youth, leveraging their existing banking partners. They aim to help youth build towards an asset. So for example, a home, starting a small business, or an emergency account. They also aim to help participants budget for housing stability. and they aim to leverage the resources like free tax time help and tax credit to help youth successfully file their taxes. For the second part, the policy and systems change piece, Youth Prize is working on continuing to design their programs and services in partnership with youth in step with the colonizing wealth and critical race theory principles. They are requesting sustainable public funding for DCT, and they're building a statewide college savings account for post-secondary education. I will now turn this over to Julianne Dunn from Rural LISC so she can tell you about her organization and their FinCap plans and goals. Julianne?
Hi, everyone. As Leslie and Mike both referenced, I'm Julianne Dunn. I'm a Senior Program Officer of Workforce and Financial Prosperity at Rural LISC. And Rural LISC is a part of the Locals Initiative Support Corporation LISC, which is a CDFI that has been around for decades, but specifically with rural, we've been around for 30 years next year. So I hope you all can join us in celebrating. We work in all 50 states and 2 territories in Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands. But for this work specifically, we be partnered with 2 organizations in Clarksdale and Greenville, Mississippi, and worked directly and indirectly with approximately 50 to 70 youth. 16 to 24-year-old youth. And we held a series of listening sessions to understand where they were with their own self-assessed financial capability, where they were getting their information from, and who were their trusted adults, as Sam mentioned earlier. And we learned quite a bit. And we also did this wonderful landscape assessment where we learned what options were out there for more education. And we learned that there were not that many options for our youth that they trusted. A lot of their primary information was coming from their family, who would tell them which bank to use, which not to use. And from that, we started sharing more financial literacy education that is beyond what they're getting for their 1 time a year session in high school and outside of high school. But as we're growing, we're hoping to build more of that into like more mentorship and coaching, because they really expressed interest in like very deeply embedding financial capability into their lives, but they didn't know where to start. And very much like the MyPath plan of connecting people who are representative of where these youth are coming from and helping them understand how it applies to them, and what makes sense to them. Because like Mike said, you can't financial capability someone out of if they're living on an unlivable wage or in a situation where they can't get a job. So this is part of what we're trying to do. We're also connecting Clarksdale and Greenville, because even though they're relatively close to each other, they've actually never visited each other to understand the regional aspect of what they're doing. And we're building in monthly financial capability workshops and hopefully training the youth to then be trainer themselves so that they can then be that trusted, well-educated adult in the community, and connecting them directly with financial institutions in their community to help build that trust, to make sure they understand that these financial institutions are working for them. But that's where we are right now, especially in Clarksdale and Greenville. But we're also hoping to share some of what we learned with the other 75 organizations that I work with through my Workforce and Financial Prosperity Plan, because what has come up in our conversations in Clarksdale and Greenville are not unique to Mississippi. They are what we've heard anecdotally from most of our partners. And so what we're hoping to do in Mississippi will hopefully be something we can duplicate elsewhere. I also want to shout out MyPath and Aspen for creating this community of practice, because this was very helpful for the past year to help us hone in what we were providing for our youth and what questions we were asking to get to the heart of what their challenges were and where they were feeling their own opportunities to lead in. And learning from the rest of the cohort was incredibly helpful. Learning from MyPath was very helpful. Diving into the landscape assessment was very helpful. And even having the conversations about thinking about what we've learned on a policy or larger level has really made us think and has really started to embed into the rest of our work. And that's what we are doing in Mississippi. And hopefully in the next year, you'll see we'll be moving elsewhere.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julianne. I will now turn it over to Monique.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Monique Robinson from Reconcile New Orleans, aka Cafe Reconcile. We are a 14-week workforce development training program. We use hospitality, culinary arts as the model. And over the 14 weeks, we work with young people 16 to 24 years old. We have a capacity to serve about 120 young people throughout the year. We look to this community of practice, want to really build our capacity around building out or going beyond just the occupational skills. A lot of work is done around stabilization in the 14 weeks of training. And we've gathered some data where young people, after they're employed and they're in employment retention, we follow up with them over the next 12 months after they graduate or complete. They have become stable and started expressing an interest in obtaining assets. And how do I go about getting my own apartment, housing, a car? That has really been the biggest thing. And so we were like, okay, we got to expand this financial capability curriculum. It was very basic. As Julian said, they've been around, they're celebrating 30 years next year. We are also celebrating 30 years next year. And so there's a huge alumni network in New Orleans and the greater New Orleans metro area. And so getting feedback from our current interns and alumni were really important, really finding out what after stabilization, what happens after employment. So over the past couple of years, we've been collecting that data. And what grew out of that was the importance of getting on track or navigating this world of getting loans, credit, and all of that. So embedded in our programming, the actual training, our participants are called interns. The financial capability programming or workshops happen over the 14 weeks, once a week. We have a couple of facilitators from a traditional FDIC-backed banking institution, Chase, as well as our home bank, who we use to provide those direct cash or payments to young people. It's a local bank. And so we rely on them, not just for production or products, but rather the curriculum. And so the community liaison from Chase, she comes in and facilitates a workshop once a week. And that is really driven because not all young people are the same. It is really driven by what they provide in their survey, their pre-surveys, and what their interests are. And we've learned a lot of it is around asset, getting assets, fraud prevention, as well as investments. And so it's not just the basics. Again, many young people come in using some form of banking, whether it's the non-traditional, the Chime, the Cash App, as well as traditional banking. The young people, our graduates that have gone on to employment, have used we piloted over the past 2 years an individual development account. And so this is what the community of practice and Aspen and MyPath have helped us really grow. And this is where young people can, if it's around education, entrepreneurship, housing, or transportation, we create a program where we can match funds that are saved. And so there is a cap on what is saved, and it's up to $1,000. So if they have shown that they have saved this and this is what their next steps are, we match that. And that is through funding. Yes, we do have a social enterprise through our cafe. So it's a combination of philanthropic funding as well as profits from the cafe. We understand that is limited, and we don't want them to be limited in their acquiring of assets. And so Through this project, we are partnering with our local United Way, who also has an individual development account, but more money. And so we are using them to leverage or provide a pipeline of young people to connect to their services. Additionally, as Mike stated earlier, we are in the Gulf. I know I have some of my Gulf neighbors in Mississippi and such. So natural disasters, hurricanes, storms are very prevalent. And so we are not excited that we just had one. Thankfully, we made out unscathed. But to now get data from young people about their savings and preparation, particularly in the spring and summer months leading up to hurricane season, so they can have an emergency savings, not just around having a flat tire, but being able to evacuate if need be, and those costs that come along with that. So we're doing some gathering of information. Again, thankfully, we did not have to evacuate. However, when you're talking about, we did have electricity that was out for several days, and you're talking about groceries. If you have an emergency fund, you can access that to really relieve some of that stress around those financial pressures.
Thank you, Monique. And thank you, Julianne. All right, so now for our lessons that we're going from the whole COP from the 8 agencies. The first lesson was that overall, agencies reported finding value in the COP experience and community and felt validated in their current FinCap efforts. They also felt that it supported them to build upon their FinCap strategies in customized ways. Lesson 2, there was very strong interest among COP agencies to engage in policy and systems change in and through the COP alongside FinCap practice. Many are already doing this in partnership with young people on various fronts, and we all see very important opportunities here. Some, for example, are advocating for ongoing state funding for youth cash transfers, while others have worked with their employer and industry partners to promote better pay, working conditions, and advancement options within the industry. And lesson number 3, many agencies are interested in cash transfers and guaranteed income for youth, but raise questions about their viability due to barriers, such as challenges in securing local and state funding for this, and also the challenging political climate. While these agencies raise these concerns about cash transfers and guaranteed income, they also express interest in exploring related solutions to these barriers. I will now turn it over to Mike, who will discuss the recommendations.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks, Monique and Julianne. So building on those lessons, we have a set of potential recommendations for the different types of actors on this call. For practitioners and intermediaries, the first is to move with care and intention as you develop partnerships with financial institutions. Having banking partners come present content to young people you work with is most effective if it's part of a bigger structure, just like working with employer partners on things beyond job placement, where you can give feedback and co-create content together. Those banking partners may be open to practice shifts around sharing information as appropriate and even adjusting their practices to make them more youth-friendly. This takes time and effort, but especially when coordinating with other social organizations in your community, like you heard from Monique about how Cafe Reconcile has done with United Way, or another existing relationship, it's worth it and can help those institutions meet Community Reinvestment Act requirements. Secondly, you need to adapt those financial capability development strategies to the young people you work with and the specific focuses of your programs. One of the organizations we went through briefly here was Trombone Shorty, a performing arts organization in New Orleans. Their young people go into careers in the music industry, and so they will often not become W-9 employee workers. They need to be able to navigate a really different set of practices in their relationship to income, benefits, and money more broadly. Undocumented youth face distinct challenges, and for immigrant youth more broadly, an intergenerational approach to wealth building can often be important. Finally, we encourage you to build relationships with local organizations in the direct cash transfer and guaranteed income spaces. I see some questions going on in the chat, and I think in a moment we'll maybe turn to that directly. And there's other organizations I know in the call who have expertise in that, and welcome folks to share resources around what direct cash looks like in your context that might be useful to this group. But if you don't know where to start and you don't get enough on this webinar, please contact Leslie or myself and we'll follow up with anyone. And we'll drop some additional links in the chat for inspiration. So for financial institutions, first recommendation is to offer youth-friendly accounts. MyPath has guidance on what this can look like. Second, you should build your young adult customer base, and a great way to do so is to invest time in partnering with community organizations. For funders, this is a great moment now to invest in sustaining and scaling these pilots, the implementation plans that you heard about. We'll share contact info for today's speakers at the end, and I'm glad to connect folks to our others from partners in this community of practice who weren't presenters on today's webinar for anyone who's interested. But we know these leaders only represent certain geographies. There's interest elsewhere, in Texas, for example, in new opportunities to integrate financial capability and a wealth building lens into the career and education pathways that work with young people. For folks interested in co-investment opportunities, and for those of you already investing like this in other settings, we invite you to stay in touch and coordinate what we're learning, what you're learning, and what we can share. The last set of recommendations here is for advocates, including all those groups that we just mentioned. We're all advocates, as well as folks working specifically on policy and systems change. So when we think about changes to our systems, policies, and narratives, there's an opportunity to include the priorities, perspectives, and needs of young people in wealth-building policy agendas, especially at the state and local levels. The foundation for this is, of course, access to high-quality career and education pathways, but more broadly, we can lock arms across equity advocates to be more closely aligned. For example, early wealth-building accounts, those IDAs that we heard about. Baby bonds is a whole other set of such things for the youngest young people in our societies. It's a both and. We need access to early wealth building accounts for children as well as to young adults. Young people should have access to early wealth building opportunities like Reconcile is doing in Louisiana, like Youth Prize is doing incredible work in Minnesota, and I encourage everyone to check that out. I'll paste the link again. Or like the Grow Fund, not in this cohort, but doing great work, is doing in Atlanta and Georgia. Similarly, the guaranteed income movement is building power across the country with pilots focused on a range of communities and populations, both through pilots focused specifically on young adults and through research and storytelling, unpacking the experiences of young people in guaranteed income programs more broadly. We can work more closely, both at the place-based and national level, to align our narrative strategies, how we're growing this work so we can continue to sustain it. What could a wealth building policy agenda for youth and young adults look like in our community estate, our communities or states? How could we show up better in each other's work? How can we build on what already exists? If you're interested in this, I invite you to get in touch directly. So with that, I think we have about 12 minutes left, and I'm going to invite our other presenters, Monique and Julianne, to come back up, and we can turn to questions from the group. And I don't think we've got it so that anybody who's attending can come off mute, but please share your questions in the chat. The presentation will be shared along with a recording of this with everyone. Leslie, Monique, or Julianne, what do I see? A couple themes around cash transfers. I saw one around maybe if someone wants to speak a little bit more about what we mean by that. And then I know there was a question, Leslie, about how to work with MyPath directly as well.
For the cash transfers regarding like directly to young people or accounts, opening an account.
Yeah, and I think Andrea from MyPath pasted this in the chat, that cash transfers just refers to broadly like the unconditional or conditional transfer of money to anyone, as opposed so like paying someone is a form of cash transfer in work-based learning that has that has that, or paid employment, or there's other ways of just giving folks money money that's not wages that are the focus of many interesting and powerful interventions.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, so at Reconcile, We use the stipend model. So yes, we are a workforce training program. So the behaviors of the workforce every 2 weeks getting paid, encouraging some form of direct deposit. Again, I hate to tie it back to natural disasters, but this was a perfect example as we were preparing last week for the impending storm. We had some young people who did not have direct deposit, and we were not going to be here for the physical check. So we really had a push for the direct deposit so young people could have money available to them, whether it was traditional banking or not. But if you don't have that, if you cannot access that, we do have checks that are, cut every 2 weeks. We do have, again, a home bank. It's a local bank. So we do have some young people who are navigating the immigration, and so may not be accessing traditional banking. And so we have a partner at our local bank, and they will cash the checks because we have an account there to verify that these are participants or young people in our program. So there's some workarounds until as folks are navigating particular systems, including the financial system as well as immigration. That has been a huge challenge here. Yeah, and again, young people are using what is working for them, whether it's Cash App or Chime. We also discussed and it's not just Cash App or Chime, but it's also traditional banking and fraud protection and what that looks like. Oh, I'll add, because it's a stipend and not wages, taxes are not taken out, and it does not impact if they are getting any social services, whether it's SNAP, SNAP benefits, or health benefits or housing benefits.
I'll just add really briefly how this works, how we don't, how our two GRIO Arts and Washington County Economic Alliance have different ways of doing this. Part of GRIO Arts is an actual job that they are working and learning at the same time. And as part of the youth group, the youth collective that we are in Greenville, they are actually partnered with AmeriCorps. So that AmeriCorps handles most of that process. And that's like a really good resource because sometimes our partners, especially in rural spaces, don't have the capacity to handle any kind of large group of folks. But AmeriCorps, if you're not familiar with it, it's a really good resource for this kind of work. And they do some financial literacy as well as part of their which is better than when I was in AmeriCorps, which they didn't do any kind of financial literacy, and it's not a livable wage, but it's not intended to be. But both of our sites have actively been looking to do more of some of what Monique is mentioning about some alternative ways to do this because of taxes. And I'm sure Leslie can mention this too, but some of what we talked about in our community of practice, which I thought was really helpful, is that some of our youth have additional barriers to accessing the funds. So how we give money should be really relative to what their larger concerns are, whether they have status issues, whether they have family issues, or they don't want if they're underage, they don't want their parents to have access to it. This is part of what this youth-centered process is making sure before you even set up a system is understanding how the youth are using it and want to use it and what their biggest concern of it from the next steps. And what their goals are. But as Monique also mentioned, that I want to underline this, most of our youth are wanting to move past budgets into investing and understanding lending, and even a few of them are decided they have the solution to the housing crisis, so they want to be developers themselves or entrepreneurs themselves. And so, how does that fold into what we're doing as well? And I think it was Monica says every youth is different, so we can't put these blanket statements. We have to look at the whole community to understand all of our options.
Mike or Julian, or Leslie, I can't remember the acronym. When FDIC institutions, they have these, it's a program, I can't remember the name of the program. I don't know if it's ARC or
Oh, CRA?
CRA. Thank you, Leslie. And what does it stand for? Do you remember?
Community
The Community
Reinvestment.
Reinvestment Act.
Thank you. Yes,
Go ahead,
thank
Leslie.
you. Thank you. I would say reach out because there are some staff that it is built into under the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, responsibility that they are built into their practice. I know staff capacity can be a challenge at many organizations. And so to have that already planned out and to sit down and review the curriculum and really look at who is facilitating and delivering the information, it can be a huge value. Being very clear that we're not teaching product, but rather access to information.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Monique. And there's, I'll paste in a link in a minute to the Community Reinvestment Act, but getting folks from the financial system who are representing public institutions who are regulators are part of that. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I see folks asking in the chat as well about where are their training materials, where are their financial literacy or coaching materials. I'll turn it to Leslie in a minute to share a little bit, and I know her colleagues from MyPath have been dropping things in the chat to look at there about how folks might be able to partner with MyPath. And I'll paste some links to some of those publicly accessible resources, but engaging the partners from financial institutions, it's to help build a relationship with you and think about how to navigate the tools that are in your community is a good starting point. Leslie, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I would just ask that if anyone's interested in speaking to us about how they can partner with our financial mentoring services or FinCap education, give us a call. We'd like to schedule a meeting, get to know your programs, what kind of youth you serve, so you can get a better lay of the land, so we know what products or what MyPath services best fit with your programs.
I have to also respond to Frank's question, the chat, because if I don't, any of my LISC colleagues on this group will yell at me. But part of what we do at LISC and Rural LISC is host financial opportunity centers, which are specifically designed to do one-on-one coaching for financial and employment pillars. And there is a specific training for financial coaches through that. And it has a tremendous success rate. Of course, we don't have them everywhere, but there are, I believe, about 40 urban sites, and we have 16 rural sites. And if Leslie and I have our dream, one day there will be a virtual site. There's some great training through the financial opportunity centers. MyPath is perhaps my favorite for youth specific financial literacy. And also there's a certificate for financial coaches that you can get from the Association of Financial Coaches. It's expensive though, so it's something your organization has to commit to, but I love the idea, and maybe Mike and Leslie can lead this, but some general universal training for folks who are interested in adding some level of financial capability training into their work. But there are a few out there. What I will say is there's no universal way to train financial literacy as well. I think you can see that if you follow any of the financial gurus out there. They all have their own idea of how to do it. For low income and for our youth, I haven't seen anyone really, except for MyPath, really be able to like truly articulate and encompass what our youth are facing and what they know is coming, including questions like Monique said about resiliency as climate change becomes a bigger issue for our youth, and justice impacted youth in some ways have an entirely different thing, set of challenges, as well as those who are facing, who are involved in immigration issues of any kind. There's so many other that I don't know any like financial expert who really focuses on understanding the intersectionalities that our youth are facing, as well as like our adults, like all of us. because so much of the previous financial capability training has been really focused on what Monique referenced, which is let's budget you out of this. And it's like, that's literally not possible unless you have a living wage. And don't have a health crisis, and don't have, car issues, or have an easy way to get to work, or there's just too many different ifs, ands, and buts to just focus on a budget.
Yeah. I think an unintentional, I know we're at time, but an unintentional, I guess, result that has come out. Again, yes, we use hospitality and culinary arts, but because our financial facilitator has such a presence in our program now, that has now opened the space to, hey, what is this? Like, this could also be a career pathway. And so really lean into our partners, financial capability partners, for career exploration. That was not on our radar, but it has turned out to be. And now leaning into interns, to alumni, to be peer facilitators. And one thing that happened last week that was quite exciting was, hey, let me show you my credit score. And I was like, hey, that looks good. Good, because the goal as an intern, and he just started, but hey, I want to eventually get this kind of car. And like, we weren't having those conversations before. It was literally, I just want to get a job.
I love that, Monique. Thank you. And it's really about infusing these conversations into the conversations about young people's individual goals and aspirations for their lives. Money fits into that. It's an input that they need to achieve those things, and in engaging community members, partners who have the types of technical information to be able to navigate those systems, even if you're focused on a different sectoral pathway, those types of relationships allow young people to see themselves in different ways over the years. And it's about infusing financial capability and a wealth building lens into the pathways work that you're already doing. We are 2 minutes over time, everyone. So thank you so much for joining with us and sticking with us. Huge shout out to our presenters, to Julian, to Leslie, to Monique, to Sam. It's great for you all to be with us. We will share this recording and the deck and copious links that have been pasted here with everyone. Thanks so much, everyone. Please be in touch, and we hope you have a great day and the rest of your week.